This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
Hey gang, what's going on? Hus and Remo here with you for another edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Oh, left one last night. Only one of a possible 2 points. A late goal by the San Jose Sharks with the goalie pulled, and an overtime winner meant the Jets went home with only 1 point. Could be a costly one. We'll discuss that. Hear from head coach Rick Bowness and more. And the team's actually on the ice right now. We're finishing up practice. Mike McIntyre is down at Canada Life Center, is going to join us a little bit later on. We'll also get some thoughts on the Jets and the NHL from Out of the Market with John Matisz, the NHL lead writer for thescore.com. Lots of Jets content today. We're going to get all over it right out of the gate. First off, though, welcome to everyone watching. Thanks so much for the great response of episode 500 yesterday. And make sure you're with us tomorrow, where it's actually a busy milestone week here on WST, our second anniversary. Hard to believe. First ever show, episode 1 was March 8th of 2021. And tomorrow, the second birthday of WST. That being said, we'll get to that tomorrow. Huge game against the Minnesota Wild, because today we'll look ahead to that game, but also sort of break down what happened last night and why the Winnipeg Jets ended up losing in extra time. Just before we bring in Michael Remis and get the show going, have to thank the sponsors that have been with us every step of the way and make this show possible for you. Coolbet Canada, Princess Auto, Little Brown Jug, Culligan Water, Vita Health Fresh Market, Wallace & Wallace Consolidated Supply, Canadian Club, F Apparel, Manitoba Battery, the Nick and Nicky DQ Group, Boston Pizza, Royal Sports. Plenty of options for our why not question of the day as well for our friends over at Not Auto Corp at Waverly and McGillivray. Let's get Remis in here. And Remo, how are you? Oh, that was a tough one to leave on the table last night.
Oh, man. Like, just when I thought I was over it, I was listening to these Rick Bowness, like, post-game clips, just getting them ready for the show. And I just, missed opportunities, bring back memories of, past Jets losses. Actually, it reminded me of last time Rittich, or I don't know if it was the last time, but another time this season when Rittich was in net for the other team scored with their goalie pulled against Carolina, where they scored 3 times. They're in this tight playoff race here. You need all the points in 10 seconds. That's a tough one. Huss. But on the other side, I mean, if you want to go with glass half full, I mean, they played. Well, other than, the power play, for the most part, they played a game. They played well enough to win, but they just didn't. I don't know. It wasn't the no-show game that we saw, the last couple. That might be a low bar, but I thought they played well. It was an exciting game, but that's a tough way to lose there.
Yeah, I mean, listen, credit to James Reimer. He played great and made a few circus saves. As Bowness said, and we'll get to them, the Jets didn't help their cause. They missed some wide open nets last night as well. And listen, the San Jose Sharks are draft lottery bound, hoping to get Connor Bedard. If the Winnipeg Jets are going to be a playoff team and do anything in the postseason, you need to execute better than they did last night. You need to make the most of your opportunities far better than they did last night. And when you dig down into some of the numbers coming out of the game, it's pretty clear that there's some major, major red flags where the hockey club is currently. The power play has been lost for a good period of time. I remember talking to you, Remo, at the beginning of the season, and we were mentioning how different the power play looked this year. how the puck movement was great, but the thing that really we were seeing was that the player movement, the personnel was moving around. It was creative. It was generating a ton of high-quality scoring chances, and I don't know what has happened to that group. But, man, it has looked stagnant at times. Now, they did generate some good opportunities yesterday. Probably could have had a goal or two. But 0 for 6 on the power play is not going to cut it. And if you're going 0 for 6 against a team like the San Jose Sharks, what happens when the schedule gets ramped up, which is exactly what's happening over the next 10 days for the Winnipeg Jets? I've been talking about this stretch for a while. But the Wild tomorrow night, and then Florida, Tampa, Carolina, and the Boston Bruins. That was another reason why we said yesterday they just had to have the 2 points last night. And then the other thing, and we'll hear from this from Bones, this has been a common refrain, but the lack of being able to win a faceoff is killing this team, especially penalty killing. But last night, the perfect example of that was, in the final 2 minutes when the San Jose Sharks had the goalie pulled and pretty much had the puck the entire time before evening up the game. And, I had a friend that's away on holidays right now and just sent me a text message with a clip from the Score app. And it was the Jets power play 0 for 6 and the face-off percentage, which was basically 70% for the San Jose Sharks. And those two numbers really, really do stand out, and a big reason why we're sitting here talking about a disappointing single point on a night when this team absolutely needed to have two.
Yeah, going back, I don't know, the last about 3 weeks or so, almost the last month, the power play, just in some of their losses, you can point to not capitalizing on those chances as, reasons why you would have lost by a goal. Last night, 0 for 6. That's rough. Against LA, you scored 5, but you still went 0 for 3 on the power play. It's actually pretty impressive to put up 5 goals without getting a power play. The Islanders, 0 for 3, although, there was a lot of other stuff wrong. Colorado, 1 for 5. New Jersey lost by a goal, 0 for 3. And the Columbus one was 1 for 7.
3 5-on-3s.
Yeah, and even that game, the Morrissey game against St. Louis has 0 for 6, which is incredible that, they able to win in the third period with Morrissey put the team on his back. But the power play, I agree with you. You've seen a lot of the stuff we saw from last year, not from the stuff from the beginning of the season, where they keep looking for that perfect play, not shooting, and really relying on power play 1 and not giving power play 2 an opportunity. I know it wasn't technically a power play goal, but it was right after, where power play 2 with Nick Ehlers, he gets the puck down low, nice passing play from Pionk to Wheeler, and Ehlers goes behind the net and finds Nate Schmidt. The D are coming, there he is, right in the slot, and puts it up top. So, not a power play goal, but they needed those top guys to come through last night. 0 for 6, certainly not ideal, and faceoffs you need. We've talked about it all year, and 30% is their second lowest face-off winning percentage of the season. The other one was a game earlier this year against Dallas. But you need that big face-off, in your own zone at the end, and they don't really have a guy they can rely on to it. And 32 is the second lowest mark. Again, November 25, they were 30.8%. So a couple things that's just been plaguing this team for a while. Again, failed them yesterday against San Jose. And James Reimer was excellent. Like Morgan Barron, he had the 2 shorthanded chances, the one-timer, which was he got all of, and the you saw his speed. He was fastest skater in their skills competition, burning Erik Karlsson on that one, and had a great chance. And I thought he was going to go 2 for 2 with breakaway goals in back-to-back games, but Reimer stuck with the pad. So hats off to James Reimer. I don't know if you knew this. He hadn't won here since 2013. They repeated that over and over on the broadcast, but of course you were at the game.
Yeah, I was at the game. We didn't get beaten over the head with that stat last night, but
he's from Morwena, Manitoba.
Well, I'm sure there was a few people from Morwena that made the trip to the Peg, the big city, yesterday to watch James Reimer do it. You mentioned Nate Schmidt scoring. I mean, that was an awesome moment. I mean, of course, he had been very publicly healthy scratched in the last game and came back in. And I thought he was fine last night, but obviously made a big play when the team needed it. They were having a tough time scoring goals. He got in there into one of those dirty areas, roofed a rebound, and, put the team up at a point where, you should be able to hold on, especially against a team like the San Jose Sharks. But you mentioned Remo. I mean, this team has had a real tough time protecting leads with the goalie pulled. Now, the numbers on this season will maybe get a little bit skewed by that Carolina game where the Canes scored 3 times with the goalie pulled. But this is not something that, is kind of coming out of the blue. And Bowness lamented it afterwards, and we'll hear afterwards. I mean, there's a number of things, but, you have to go back to, getting control of the puck, winning a face-off, and then when you do get the puck, having the composure to make the right play. And, we can talk about Rick Bowness's selection of players that he's throwing out there in those situations. A guy with the experience of Blake Wheeler with the puck on his stick needs to make a better play than just blindly ripping it for ice time, unable to make a change after those guys had been out there for a long time. And basically giving the San Jose Sharks the opportunity to change personnel if they want, bring it back into their own end, and start it over, because, as I said, they were winning every single faceoff last night. I know it is seemingly more common now to see teams have no issue with icing the puck, rip it at the open net, and if it goes in, great. If not, you've got a face-off. But when a team like the Winnipeg Jets can't win a face-off at a crucial point in the game, plays like that absolutely kill you. And I think I've watched it back a couple times. I think there was enough time and space to flip it up, get some nice draw weight, to use a curling term, and not ice it and maybe get a change of personnel. But that didn't happen. And that sort of decision and lack of execution all played a part in the Jets blowing that lead last night and having to go to overtime and coming out with only 1 point.
Yeah, he still had a chance there. And overtime, if everyone crashed in the net, and Logan Couture, with the breakaway goal. I mean, can't really fault Rittich on that one. I don't fault him on the hurdle goal. Wheeler deflects the puck, ends up on a stick. Perfect. A one-timer spot for hurdle there with 10 seconds left. We have talked about, or they did on the broadcast, just that first one where it seemed like he had opportunities to cover it, wasn't able to. But the Jets actually on that first goal, they had tried to make a neutral zone tip pass, didn't go. Sharks get it, regroup, go down. Shot from distance, bobbled, can't pick it up, and in the net. And I think Ridge has been mostly fine this year, aside from a couple games. And look, we've talked about the Jets needing 3 goals to win. Well, they had 2 yesterday. Plenty of opportunities to score a third. We talked about Barron, 6 power plays. There was one where Wheeler and Lowry back to back had a wide open net at the side, and I think Lowry was just walking on the bench, looking at the ceiling. Chances were there. They played well enough to win, but they didn't get the 2 points. And I know a lot of us were scoreboard watching after, and the team that was able to win was Calgary. So now, you had on Saturday where the Jets won and Calgary lost, you gained some points, so you just gave it back to them. As we watch this, someone wrote in our YouTube comments as to what a turtle race here for this last spot in the West. Sorry. Who wants it? Who wants it? Is it Calgary, Winnipeg, or Nashville? I think it's going to be one of those 3 teams, and Winnipeg losing, and Nashville, but they lost in overtime last night, and Calgary was able to pull out the win. So
yeah, we went out after the game to a spot that had the center ice package and threw that Dallas-Calgary game on, and you could just hear the groans in the bar when Calgary won that thing with 4 seconds left. Just back to the play at the end. Bobby, a big guy, says, how is Wheeler's pot shot at an empty net any different than when DeMello hit the empty net versus the Oilers the game before? Well, the one thing I'll say, and again, I can't remember exactly the play, but I do remember DeMello sort of ripped it off of the boards. And I think he was maybe under a little bit more duress at the time. Ended up getting lucky with it going in. last night, I mean, when Wheeler had that opportunity to do it, I mean, there was enough space. If you slow it down and look at where it was, whether you're taking a different angle and getting it off the boards, across the ice, there was certainly some space there. Bottom line is, if you can't win a faceoff, that becomes way, way more dangerous than, a lot of the teams that'll be more than happy to do that. And Bobby B makes a great point. The 70% failure in the faceoff circle clearly hinders the power play as well and doesn't help in overtime, nor with 10 seconds left in the third. And, part of the reason why Kevin Stenlund has played as much as he has is that he's been the one guy that's been able to get close to 50% in winning draws. And I will talk about this with Mike later on. For all the things that NHL players and centers work on, it is amazing that the Winnipeg Jets don't have one guy that can go in and consistently get the better of their opponents in the faceoff circle. I mean, we talk about what a hockey nerd Mark Scheifele is and all the things that he does. I mean, for the amount of skills and whatnot that he works on, you would think that the faceoff would be better. I mean, Adam Lowry as well, for a guy that, was playing the role that he has. And Dubois, I think, was 22% last night. All of those things add up to giving other teams more opportunities to score. And to Bobby's point, if you're losing every faceoff to begin the power play, you're basically talking about a 1 minute, 40-second power play, because essentially you're starting behind your own net. And we saw a lot of that last night, and it ended up costing the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, just going over the faceoff numbers, an off night for Kevin Stenlund. He's at 14%, Scheifele 41%, Dubois 22%, who returned from injury, Adam Lowry 31%. And has I don't know how many faceoffs he took, but it has Nikolai Ehlers as number 100% faceoff percentage, and he did get on the board. We mentioned with the assist to Nate Schmidt. Those are kind of funny. The two guys, like, it was such a great story. Has Kyle Connor bobblehead night. He gets an assist. Nate Schmidt benched last game, or scratch, whatever you want to use, scores the go-ahead goal. Nikolai Ehlers, we talked all show yesterday. He's got to be better. Steps up, assisting on that goal, and all the great storyline. We had they're talking about broadcast. Morrissey versus Carlson, and then it's, as you said, Carlson. Well, he didn't look great on, sometimes he did assist on the game-winning goal and game-tying goal. And I didn't want to mention this, but I saw Leslie mention in chat before the show. I said the Jets bobblehead curse, when the featured player plays in the game. Coming in, they were 1-5. Now they are 1-5-1. This being an overtime loss. Although Kyle Connor, he had, what do you have? 6 shots here? Yeah, 6 shots on goal. He had an assist. Hey, it's a team game, though. And they didn't win, and the streak, or the poor play when the featured bobblehead player plays in the game, still not great. I know it means nothing, but it is kind of funny.
Chris Koff in chat goes, when is close to 50% acceptable? Well, when you're winning faceoffs at about a 35% clip, because it's a hell of a lot better. I mean, I think usually, sometimes you'll see teams, 55-45, 52-48. I mean, to get dominated the way the Jets did, against a very young San Jose Sharks team without any of the talent or personnel, for the most part, that the Winnipeg Jets have, has to be incredibly frustrating for Rick Bowness. And T. Will sort of echoes what I was just mentioning. I mean, a big part of the power play problem is that they always start the power play by fishing the puck out of their own zone and then need to gain the zone, which are also not particularly good at right now. So lots to work on today at practice for the Winnipeg Jets. But let's hear a little bit before we move on to our conversation with John Matisz and Mike McIntyre. We'll certainly get into more on last night with Mike. Certainly the face-off's a huge issue for the Winnipeg Jets. This isn't anything new, but it really was impactful last night. Bones talked about the lack of success in the face-off circle after the game.
Hold on, sorry, something got messed up here. You can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, something got screwed up here.
Oh, okay, so we don't have Bones?
Well, I have it, but it's going to not sound right. So 1 second.
All right, we'll get that again. Shots in the game, 38-24 in favor of the Jets. And Remo has the money puck, the deserve to win-o-meter was nice. Doesn't matter a damn thing if you're leaving points on the table like the Jets did last night. And 0 for 6 on the power play. They did kill 2 penalties, but an eminently winnable game that didn't go the Jets' way. I will say this, Nino Niederreiter, absolutely deservedly the first star for the Winnipeg Jets last night. And we'll talk a little bit more about what stands out about Niederreiter compared to the rest of his teammates in a minute. But I think we've got Bones. Here's what he had to say about the lack of success in the dot last night.
Losing faceoffs, 32%. Yeah, that was a bad night. A hurdle goes 16-3 or whatever it was. So, yeah, they had a dominant night in the faceoffs.
You guys certainly had your chances. How much do you credit, I guess, James Reimer and what he did, and just maybe lack of puck luck? Or?
Yeah, well, we missed some open nets. We did. He made a lot of great saves. Give him credit for that. I still would like to see us put more pucks on the net when we can. And, we spent a lot of time in their zone in the second period when we had 11 shots. We'd like to, again, put more pucks at the net. But, again, we had a lot of great A's, and he made a lot of big saves. And the chances we had to put them in the open net, we missed. And, it ends up biting you.
All right, there's Rick Bowness, little dejected after the game last night, and probably somewhat exasperated with some of his centermen, considering how much you would think that they have worked on these faceoffs, just how big of a part in the story they played last night. One guy that stood out last night was 62, Nino Niederreiter. He continues to do everything that I think the Winnipeg Jets hoped that he would when they acquired him a week ago for a second-round pick. The other thing that Niederreiter stands out, and maybe this is more a condemnation of the rest of the team, but is the fire that he's playing with, the energy, the physicality that he's bringing, and the energy in particular that was missing at times last night, even while the Jets had their way with the Sharks for the majority of the 60 minutes. Bones talked about Nino Niederreiter, who got his first as a Jet and his 200th as an NHLer last night.
Yeah, well, that's he looks exactly like we hoped he would when we got him. That's what we need from him. That's a big, heavy guy. He's a big, heavy guy. If you watch him in the power plays, even though the power play didn't score, he did a really good job in the bumper position. So he's everything that we hoped he would be.
Oh, okay, yeah. Last night, Nate Schmidt did get back into the lineup, as we mentioned, scored a big goal after observing the festivities on Saturday night when he was a healthy scratch. Bone talked a little bit about Nate Schmidt getting on the board and also what he thought of Nikolai Ehlers.
Nate was very good tonight. Very happy for him to get that goal. Good for him, right? But he was much better today, much more consistent with his level of play. Yeah.
And then Nick as well.
Nick was good, yeah, and he made a nice play there at the end. Yeah. I mean, I put him with Adam Lowry at the end. The Dubois line wasn't getting very much done creative. They weren't creating a lot of all the lines, so I tried something different, put him with Adam at the end there and Wheels. So, yeah, they're both no problems.
All right, so there's Rick Bowness, and listen, you got to feel good for Nate Schmidt after being a healthy scratch, getting that goal, and certainly he played a role in the game last night. I don't know about you, Remo, though. When I heard Rick Bowness's, that was a very lukewarm compliment, if I've ever heard one, for Nikolai Ehlers, who still at times shows the bursts and the skills that has made him such an effective player for the Winnipeg Jets, but it's quite clear that he's not at the level that we've maybe seen from him consistently for the last few seasons. And Rick Bowness, I don't think, is trying to be negative right now, but they absolutely need more from him. And there were glimpses of that last night.
Yeah, you look at the numbers, Huss, and in terms of scoring efficiency, like per minute of ice time, he's up there among leaders with points per 60 at 5-on-5, and on the power play, And although you look at his raw numbers, just the last 9 games or so, and he got an assist yesterday, hasn't been what it was earlier, where you thought maybe you could be a close to point per game player. And I mean, I don't know what it is about Nikolai Ehlers. That the coaches don't seem to enjoy. I don't know if it's his freewheeling, a unique style. Maybe they want him to play more rigid. But I think you look at the results when he's on the ice. He scores points, and he did. We talked about his ice time. He got 11:52 against Edmonton, and yesterday he had 14:57. But again, you look at his last, 10 games here. He's got 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points, -8, and it's not what you want to see, or not what Nick. That Ehlers is capable of more than 3 points in 10 games.
Yeah, and listen, they've had a real tough time finding a consistent spot for him in the top 6 with the center that clicks. I think we've seen Niederreiter come in and really provide something on that top line, along with Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor. But to be honest with you, both Scheifele and Connor have left me wanting more quite a bit over the course of the past month. And, even last night, I mean, Kyle Connor had some opportunities. I think he was squeezing it a little bit at a certain point, but they're just not functioning together the way that, maybe they have in the past, despite the contributions of Niederreiter, who has been, such a needed addition to this Winnipeg Jet lineup. A little bit more from Bones, because, the Jets had 38 shots, and some people will say that the team was goalied. Rick Bowness, I think, would agree that a lot of that was on the Winnipeg Jets for not finishing chances. This is him responding to a question from Matisz on that topic.
In the sort of bigger picture, you guys have been struggling to find exactly that consistency, exactly your game. Is there a mentality thing to take away from maybe not bearing down and finishing some of those chances? Is it harder to go through that?
No, I think they're
tonight?
bearing down. I do. They're not. It's not like they're not trying to score tonight. They are. I mean, we got 6 the other night, so it just didn't go in for us tonight. Again, you can't. You have those empty nets. You're not trying to miss it. You're trying to put it in. Morgan Barron had 2 great looks, shorthanded. He gave him credit. He made 2 great saves on those, both of them. So they're bearing down. They're trying. And some nights the other goalie's just better than the shooter. That's one of those nights.
Well, there's Bones giving credit where it is due, certainly to James Reimer, but the execution of finishing chances hasn't been there, and I think that is kind of a microcosm of a number of things that the Jets aren't doing very well. I mean, we still see way too many passes and skates, and then when it came to defending and holding a lead, starting with the faceoff circle, wasn't good enough there as well. And it's part of the reason why we're talking about a 3-2 extra time loss to the San Jose Sharks. It also could have been different if the power play clicked. 0 for 6 on the power play with the man advantage. Here's what Bones had to say about the power outage on the power play.
It's still this can be the same thing. That they had some good looks. Nino had a high tip there in the end. They had some good looks, not enough. That's you have that many opportunities. You'd like to see more, a couple of chances per power play. If if he's making the saves, he's making the saves. Some of those power plays, we didn't create anything. The ones that we did create chances on, he made the saves.
All right, so Rick Bowness on the power play. One more from Bones. I'm not sure I asked this question, but I guess referring to the fact that they did control play for the majority of the game, had a large advantage in shots on goal. Bones asked whether that game was somewhat of a recipe for the Jets' success going forward.
I mean, we all played them tonight, and it's hard when you lose that extra point in overtime and you're disappointed. It's hard to get a good picture of it right now. We'll take our time tomorrow, reevaluate, to take a look at the whole game, take a look at the power play, and come up with something different. But did we play a bad game? Absolutely not. Did we deserve 2 points? Yeah, but we didn't get them. That's hockey.
All right, so there's Rick Bowness with his thoughts on the performance last night. And I'll just say this team is going to need to ramp it up starting tomorrow when the Minnesota Wild come to town, one of the hottest teams in the West over the last little while. They do play tonight against the Calgary Flames. So maybe a Minnesota win tonight and then a tired hockey club coming into Winnipeg tomorrow would be just what the doctor ordered for Winnipeg. But I think it's quite clear you can't count on anybody else to do anything for you right now. You have to make that happen for yourselves, and the Winnipeg Jets just came up short last night. One real positive was the play of Nate Schmidt getting that goal last night after spending Saturday night in the press box. Here's what Schmidt had to say about lighting the lamp at such a big point in the game. Unfortunately, it didn't turn out to be the winner.
It's we always talk about possession before position for when it comes to the power play, and it's a spot for me that was new, especially going to the bumper. But with the wheels and fly and running the half wall, you just kind of have to find the open spot for you to go and just kind of man that area. And fly makes a great play for me to have a chance there.
Judging by the reaction, Nate, was there some pent-up emotion behind that celebration?
Yeah, especially late in the game too. You give your team a chance to win. A couple minutes left in the game. Our power play unit had some chances. The second period we had some chances that we didn't capitalize on. So we take pride in that unit as well, and I think that was it was exciting. It was pretty fired up.
All right, so there's Nate Schmidt, who had what many thought would be the winner last night. Unfortunately, with 10 seconds left, San Jose tied it up, and that was that. Now, we will get to more on last night's game. We'll also find out how practice went today. Tell you that no PLD on the ice today, but David Gustafson went in sort of seemingly a placeholder for Dubois with Wheeler and Connor. Niederreiter still skating with Ehlers and Scheifele. Lowry, Appleton, and Nemetsnikov was the third line, and Morgan Barron skating along with Saku Menelainen and Kevin Stenlund. Extras were Janssen, Fjallby, Gagne, and Kuhlman, essentially a fifth line right now. And Kyle Capobianco was back at practice, skating along with Dylan Samberg. And interestingly enough, Logan Stanley with Nate Schmidt, and then the two pairings we saw a lot of last night, Morrissey Pionk and Dylan and DeMello. But first up, we're going to get a little thought on the Jets from outside of the market. A little talk about post-trade deadline around the National Hockey League and the arms race in the East before Mike joins us from Canada Life Center a little bit later on. Before we do that, though, got to give a big thanks to our friends over at Manitoba Battery. If you're in need of a battery for your car, truck, or even that summer toy you're working on this winter, Manitoba Battery has the most convenient and well-priced options in the city. And you can put an order in for your battery around lunchtime or even the start of Winnipeg Sports Talk and have it sitting on your doorstep in 2 to 4 hours for less money than you'd spend anywhere else in Winnipeg on the same battery. Basically, the Amazon of batteries here in Winnipeg, and you're shopping local. No more fighting for a parking spot at Costco, no waiting in line at Canadian Tire, and no more spending money on a battery at the big box stores. Let Manitoba Battery bring the battery to you while you spend time on more important things. Spend 2 minutes making a phone call or order online at manitobabattery.com. Manitoba Battery, the leaders in all batteries in Winnipeg with the best prices and most convenient service in town. You can also pop by and see them, of course, at 1026 Logan Avenue. Funny shout out for our friends at Consolidated Supply yesterday when Frank Saravelli was on with us. We talked about them being the leaders in small engine parts and engine repair. As we've broken down, there's a few areas of the Winnipeg Jets game right now that needs a little fixing. But in addition to engine parts, Consolidated Supply, the leaders in irrigation options for landscaping as well as artificial turf, as the go-to guys in the golf industry for decades. And of course, the only licensed club car dealer in Manitoba as well. But they do have so much more, including spas and hot tubs and incredible outdoor kitchen options. Talk to Spicy Joe and the gang. Pop by and see him actually at 1395 Niagara Road East. Or you can find out more online at cte.ca. Don't forget, folks, our Unsung Hero program with Wallace & Wallace and Josh Morrissey continues. Send us your nominations for this month's Unsung Hero to unsunghero at winnipegsportstalk.com. Let us know that person in your community that's making a difference by selflessly devoting hours of their time through volunteerism, charity work, and more, or being that go-to person on the block that is always helping out their neighbors in need. Unsung Hero at winnipegsportstalk.com. We'll have our Unsung Hero win a autographed Josh Morrissey jersey. and $500 donation to the Dream Factory on behalf of the nominator. From WST listener from Wallace and Wallace, and Josh and Margaret Morrissey are going to match that as well. And just before we get to John Matisz, if you're looking for great prices on natural and organic supplements, beauty products, and groceries, and Winnipeg's largest assortment of local products too, you got to stop by and check out our friends at Vita Health Fresh Market. Spring is just around the corner, folks, thank God. Get ready for it with Ultimate Male Energy. Formulated specifically for men over 35, Ultimate Male Energy is designed to improve testosterone production, reduce excess body fat, build muscle tissue, maintain prostate health, and more. It's on sale today at Vita Health. Vita Health Fresh Market, empowering people to lead healthy lives. 7 Winnipeg locations, including the newest store in Linden Ridge, and online at myvita.ca. All right, Mike McIntyre coming up right now. Let's welcome in John Matisz from The Score. John, welcome back to Winnipeg Sports Talk. How are you?
Andrew, pleasure joining you guys as usual. Last time we talked Kyle Connor. This time I imagine different topics, but let's get at it.
Well, we are obviously obsessing over this team every day with the ups and downs, and it has been quite a roller coaster. Well, unfortunately, a little bit more of the plunge over the past 6 weeks. Wild game last night in Edmonton. And then, who knows, but potentially blowing a point that could be very, very important last night. I always like getting people's perspective on the Jets from outside of the market. What do you make of where they've been, the way they played over the last month or so, as well as what they did and didn't do at the trade deadline?
Sure. Well, last night, as we were talking about before we started pressing record here, bit of an unfortunate way that all went down as far as not getting 2 points. And Morgan Barron having that breakaway in the second period with Erik Karlsson, huffing and puffing, trying to catch up to him. And, Barron makes a good move and Reimer just sticks his leg out and hopes for the best. And that obviously would have been an absolute game changer. It would have been 2-1 Winnipeg. And, Bowness probably would have put the defensive shield up. And, that Sharks team is just not very talented when you get beyond Karlsson and whatever Couture and Hurdle are these days. It gets pretty thin out there. So it honestly, it seems cliche or it seems like overly dramatic, but not getting the 2 points there seems like one of those moments when you look back and either they missed the playoffs by a point or they missed the first wild card by a point and now they have a tougher matchup. And it's because of something like that. And, there's 82 games, so you could say that about really all of them. But that one just seemed like it was in their hands. And then, Niederreiter hits the post at one point. He obviously scores. And it's great to see Nate Schmidt score for the first time in a while. And after getting scratched, there were nice takeaways. There were nice storylines. But unfortunately, they didn't get the 2 points. And I think Niederreiter's been a welcome addition. I thought when the trade happened, my first thought, honestly, was, him going just for a second. I'm like, that is the most fair value trade that I had seen to that point. It made sense. I can't remember if Tanner Jeannot was before or after, but it was right around the same time. And obviously that trade was outrageous. 5 picks and a player for a guy like Tanner Jeannot, who's a middle 6 winger. So I thought the Niederreiter acquisition made a ton of sense. I think we've seen through a few games here that he's got some chemistry with Connor and Scheifele. They're up 3-1 at 5-on-5 and have a 60% expected goals rate. So you really can't do much better than that. And I was left wanting more as the deadline closed from the Jets perspective, which I'm sure is a sentiment shared by most of Winnipeg fans. This is a team that's kind of in this 2-year window where, as of not this summer coming up, 2023, but 2024, there could be huge roster changes between Wheeler, Scheifele, Dubois, and Hellebuyck all being UFAs, and the team in general, whether it's Connor or Niederreiter, who's also going to be a UFA. All these guys, all these important pieces, they're all getting older. Aside from Perfetti, they're getting on the older side of things with their core. So within that context, it's okay, you either go for it this year or you go for it next year, or maybe there's a shakeup in the off season and this isn't a relevant conversation. But I was a little underwhelmed, and I know it's kind of a Kevin Cheveldayoff trademark. He's not a hugely he's not huge on the trade market. He's not doing too many deadline moves over the years, so maybe par for the course. But the West is so wide open. The Oilers made some pretty big moves, and the Jets, while added to their forward group, I feel like left something on the table there.
It's funny because, like in the past, 2018, they traded their first for Paul Stastny. They did the same thing in 2019 with a first for Kevin Hayes, which obviously didn't work out as well as the Stastny acquisition. The way I think a lot of people, myself included, read the lack of major activity outside of the Niederreiter deal and the Adam Nemetsnikov was the fact that, with this core and where the team is, I'm not sure they felt it was like this was a real cup contender that you'd want to go and spend tons of future assets. Because, John, as you correctly mentioned, these contracts are ending after next season. We talk about a 2-year window. I'm not sure it's not a 1-year window, because if you are Kevin Cheveldayoff, the Winnipeg Jets, with the way they've built their team, with what they have the ability to do free agency-wise, these guys can't all walk for nothing if they're not being re-signed. And, the way I read the tea leaves is that come the end of this season, one way or another, there's going to get clarity on Connor Hellebuck. If they don't already have clarity on Pierre-Luc Dubois, that will be realized. And if those guys aren't sticking around, those guys are probably getting moved. And I might even include Mark Scheifele in that group as well. Blake Wheeler's at a different point in his career. See what happens on that. And obviously, Niederreiter, the brilliance of that trade is that if they do rebuild, blow it up, whatever, I'm not sure they don't get more than a second-round pick at some point for Niederreiter being traded. But
sure.
It kind of seems like I don't think they had the confidence to risk important future assets on this season, kind of just see how it went. And then come a few months, I expect there to be some wild conversations on this program about the future of the Winnipeg Jets, because I'm not sure all those guys are back one more time to run it back and then pick up the pieces at the end of next season.
Yeah, I think the main thing I'd say to that is I hope that Cheveldayoff is going to be decisive. I hope he has a concrete plan, because that's kind of what irks me about certain franchises is they're just so willy-nilly about it, or they're in this prime window to contend. You have these incredible pieces, and then you sort of just a couple moves around the edges, and you don't raise that ceiling high enough when the whole point of this is to win championships. So to use Washington as an example, I really like what they did at the deadline, because their GM decided, listen, this isn't our year. If you look at the standings, there's 6-7 better teams in the East. But we have Alex Ovechkin, and our owner has said we are not rebuilding at the end of his career, at the tail end here, as he chases Gretzky's record. So you're sort of given this window, right? And so instead of holding on to a couple UFAs and making the playoffs and maybe winning a round, they cleared a lot out, and they're trying to retool. And there's just a very obvious, decisive, aggressive plan in place. And you could say the same thing for Toronto, where they went kind of nuts and added 6 players. And their situation obviously is very unique with their GM's contract expiring, the team not winning in the playoffs for 6-7 years, etc. But again, I like how decisive it is. And decisive doesn't necessarily mean that you need to go fully one way or fully the other way. So perhaps the Jets, as you mentioned, do have this plan in place, and the plan is actually, we don't fully trust this group to contend for a cup. So we're going to kind of slowly and quietly, kind of meticulously get rid of some of these players and try to, I guess you could say, retool, because I highly doubt they're going to go with a full on rebuild. So when you frame it that way, Andrew, I think it maybe lessens my criticism. But again, I go back to the whole point of this is to win championships, and you've spent a lot of time on this core, and to just come to the realization now is maybe a little late in the process. And I'd throw a team like the Nashville Predators in there. They were decisive at the deadline, but it took David Poile to say, I'm going to retire, for them to finally start selling. And if you look at their cap sheet, it's a complete disaster. But they've started to sort of realize, okay, we're not going to win with this group, with Ryan Johansson, with Matt Duchene, with all these other guys. Roman Yossi's great. UC Saros is great. But after that, we've paid the wrong guys. So I don't know if that's how Winnipeg's really looking at it. But it's very possible because of not inaction around the deadline. They did something. But clearly they're sending the signal that perhaps this isn't, quote unquote, their year.
The irony of the whole thing, John, is that, I mean, considering the way the team played, I mean, if they didn't have that great start, and maybe, overachieve compared to what most people's expectations of this team was, certainly for the first half of the year, I'm not sure the Jets aren't in a position of the likes of Washington and Nashville potentially making some pretty significant moves at this deadline. But, I mean, it's pretty hard to do that when you are sitting in a playoff spot, although for a team that was sniffing around first place in the Central for a long time, it's very different when you look at the conference standings right now. That being said, I just wanted to get your thoughts. I mean, I think we can pretty much eliminate St. Louis and everyone below. Calgary and Nashville, do you think either of those teams have a run in them to make it interesting for the final playoff spot in the West?
Calgary and Nashville. I don't think Nashville. I think, if anything, we'll see some load management, or we'll see some, UC Saros gets used a ton. He's relied on maybe more than any other goalie in the league as far as the shots he faces and the starts that he makes.
He and Connor Hellebuck right at the top of that list.
Exactly.
It's always funny when these two teams play each other because they have maybe the two biggest workhorses in the NHL.
Absolutely. So, maybe there'll be a start here and there that Saros doesn't take, and his backup slides in there. So, Calgary obviously has the talent. I think on paper they've underachieved. I think the Jonathan Huberdeau acquisition, and by no means would I call it a bust or a poor trade at this point in time, because it included a long extension, and he's a tremendous player. We'll see what happens long term, but it hasn't worked out. Jacob Markstrom's had a terrible year. The issue with them is that they played 64 games. Colorado, who's in the second wild card, 61. So not only are the Flames 5 points back, but they're the team that they're chasing has 3 games in hand. So that's very difficult, because there's something to be said for having 74 points in 61 games like the Avalanche, right? Those are banked points. It's nice to say, oh, Calgary has this chance, but that 5-point gap is pretty tremendous at this point. So honestly, I think the West is pretty set. Sure, Nashville and Calgary could make a run for it, but I still think that Colorado is a favorite to come out of the West, at least part of a tier with Dallas and maybe an Edmonton because of McDavid and Draisaitl. I think Colorado, they haven't even fielded a full roster the entire season. They're just scratching the surface in terms of what they can do. So it's kind of crazy to look at the standings and go, let's keep the Avalanche at the top of mind for cup contending when there's no guarantee that they even make the playoffs. But that's how highly I think of them in their roster.
Well, listen, the Jets are 1 point up on the Avs right now, and the Jets have played 3 more games. I'm with you. I still think Colorado is going to be the team to beat, at least in the Central Division. And the Winnipeg Jets are going to need to pick up some points to avoid being in a dogfight for that final playoff spot. They got a tough schedule coming up. You got the Minnesota Wild tomorrow night, and then heading out to Florida, Tampa, Carolina, coming back to play the Boston Bruins. And that's why that point that they left on the table last night sort of stings, I'm sure, inside the dressing room and certainly amongst the fan base. Heading over to the East, you've covered this league for a long time. Just your thoughts on not necessarily the trade deadline day being big, but an arms race unlike anything I can remember for the better part of 2 weeks leading up to the deadline amongst most of the top teams in the East, minus the Carolina Hurricanes, who were sort of more a Jets route, getting a couple good value players at relatively low cost.
Yeah, ironically, it starts with the New York Islanders, a team in the wild card who, at the end of this may not make it, getting Bo Horvat back on, I think it was January 30th. And a pretty significant first domino when you think about it. A first was in that trade, a couple of one young player in Bavillier and one B prospect in Atu Ratu. So that really, started, kind of start your engines out east with that one. And then I think the Orlov trade was a pretty big domino as well, going with Hathaway over to the Bruins. And I assume that Toronto just looked at what Boston was doing and said, like, we just can't stand pat. We can't let this deadline pass without completely, basically overhauling a third of the roster. The one thing with that, and don't get me wrong, I like the O'Reilly acquisition. I like McCabe. I like pretty much everything that they did in a vacuum. But did they add too many players? I mean, 6 players into your lineup of 18 skaters, that's very significant. And there's plenty of time here for them all to get adjusted. They're all pros, etc. But that's something in the back of my mind in terms of, is there sort of a diminishing returns there on flipping the roster too much, affecting the dressing room too much? Because there's still players that didn't go out the door that are around. We saw Engvall and Sandin and a couple others leave. But, like, if you were the 6th defenseman and now you're sitting in the press box, how's that affecting your mood? So I thought that was pretty interesting. Obviously, Tampa, they went crazy in terms of Tanner Jeannot. I totally get it from their perspective, but still a crazy price to pay. And you mentioned Carolina kind of hanging tight there, not doing a whole lot, while the Devils loaded up with Meyer and the Rangers loaded up with Tarasenko, Mott, Mikkola, and Kane. So, I mean, it's a gauntlet out there. I mean, let's not mince our words here. There's going to be teams that loaded up significantly that are going to lose in the first round. And obviously, from a fan perspective, you love it. From a media perspective, you love it. But, is there a GM in here that's going to get fired because of what they did, because of how they loaded up? I don't know. But it's incredibly exciting. And it's funny, right? Because on one hand, given what the Boston Bruins have been doing, they're at a historic pace. You would think some organizations would go, we're not going to beat this team. Like, it's just not our year. Let's project towards next year. Even if we're in this cup contending window, let's leave our assets that we can trade for next year. Let's not go crazy here. Maybe we get in the playoffs and something cool happens. It's all gravy because Boston's the toast of the league. But it was almost the opposite, where teams saw other teams in the East loading up and they got crazy. They went bananas. So it's awesome to see. And I'd say the only team I'm kind of disappointed in the East is the Penguins, because all they did was add, Bonino and Granlund and Kulikov. And I don't know if any of those guys move the needle. And normally that's fine if you're, this team that may or may not make the playoffs and you got an older group. But you have Crosby and Malkin and Letang in this really tight window. And if you're going to do something, like, it's got to be more significant than that. Or if you don't think this is your year, hold off. And for whatever reason, they did something in the middle of those two things. So the East is it's bonkers right now.
Well, the funniest thing about Pittsburgh is we heard that they were all in on JT Miller, but the Canucks did not want draft capital to come back. And that's a whole nother conversation about the way the Canucks are handling their situation right now and what we expect to come at this summer. But you mentioned the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I know out east it's all focused on Toronto and the pending series between these two teams that we pretty much could have put tickets on sale for the middle of November. But Tampa hasn't looked anything like the Tampa Bay Lightning as of late. I caught some of that game on Sunday afternoon. They had 4 shots in the first period and 0 in the second. And that, of course, coming off a night where Point, Kucherov, Stamkos had been benched by John Cooper. What do you make of where the Lightning are at right now?
Pretty concerned, if I'm being honest, in terms of looking at them and their future of the season. With the caveat of this is the Tampa Bay Lightning, man. They're a really well-run organization. 3 cup finals in the last 3 years, 2 cups in those 3 years, and same coach, same stars. Like, is this just the inmates fighting with the prison guard, so to speak, for lack of a better term, where there's some sort of disagreement there over ice time, over usage, over effort. And this is Cooper butting heads with the Stamkoses and Hedmans and Points. It sure seems like that from afar, but what's perhaps most concerning is, like you laid out, that egg that they laid in that 6-0 defeat, where they barely even get any shots on goal, because that was after the benching. So you wonder what's going on here.
Not the response John Cooper was looking for from his team.
And it's the entire team, right? Like, if you want to eliminate those stars and have your conversation with them and something's going on with them, that's one thing. But for the rest of the team to not show up, that's a whole other can of worms. So it's one of those things where I'm sure it'll blow over. I'm sure Tampa will be fine. And as lame and old school as this sounds, maybe they need a little adversity. Maybe they need a little dust up here. It's been a really long 3-4 years, and you can even go back. Like, they made the Cup final in 2015 with not a lot of the same guys, but a handful. And guess who's been around the whole time? John Cooper. And as much as we love him in the media, and he's obviously a great coach tactically, personally, in terms of the dynamics in the room, everyone's going to tire of a coach. And I don't know if that's what this is, but there's certainly some sort of interpersonal butting of heads there, which is quite interesting from afar. But I wouldn't, if they were just picking a team, the Buffalo Sabres or the Ottawa Senators, and this was happening, I think it'd be a lot easier to laugh at them, to mock them. But I feel like Tampa's built up this gravitas, this aura around them, and they have the cups to prove it, that you assume it's going to be all sorted out over the stretch drive here.
Well, and Leaf fans, I'm sure, are more worrying about their own team right now. But something tells me they'll get their act together by the time we drop the puck on the Stanley Cup playoffs. Hey, one more for you. You just mentioned Ottawa and Buffalo. The East, pretty much lock in the top 6 teams. The Islanders are in the first wild card with 72 points, but have played 65 games. And then you've got Pittsburgh in at 71 points, having played 62. And then a group, 4 teams at 68. Buffalo's played 62 games, Ottawa 63, Panthers 64, and the Caps 65. Put your prognostication hat on for a minute, John, and how do you see this playing out? Who, if you had to lay a nickel down right now, who are the 2 wildcard teams in the East?
Yeah, I like that. I think I'm confident that the Islanders will make it, either first or second wild card. Less confident about the Penguins. And gun to my head, I feel like Buffalo's going to squeak in. I think it's, they could potentially be swept in the first round by the Boston Bruins, or if they end up as the second or the first wild card, maybe it's Carolina. Like, I don't think Buffalo's ready to win playoff rounds, but I honestly think they're building something pretty special there. I think between the culture and how it's been turned around since Eichel left to the on-ice results, they're plus 10 in goal differential right now. And say the Penguins, who are ahead of them, are plus 2. And if you look at anyone outside the playoffs, they're in and around plus 5, plus 2, plus 1. If they're in the negatives, like, Buffalo's got this really high-end offensive machine. And their goaltending is somehow held up this year with Craig Anderson, Eric Comrie, and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, this 3-headed monster, which is pretty interesting in and of itself. And I believe in Don Granato. Tage Thompson has this game-breaking ability. They also have 62 games played in a conference that has a lot of teams at 63, 64, 65. So in terms of good storylines and even just playing the odds, I have a feeling that the Sabres are going to squeak in there and bump out the Penguins.
I'm here for it. I'd love to see and listen, Buffalo, their fan base. It's such a great sports city. They haven't seen playoff hockey in forever.
The longest drought ever, 11 years. It's wild.
And just think about how bad those teams have been over the course of those 11 years. It would be pretty cool to see Buffalo make it in. John, thanks so much for doing this. Fill people in on what you and the team have kicking over at the Score following the National Hockey League.
Sure, yeah. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at MATISJOHN. It's probably the best way to find my stories, but certainly download the Score app if you don't already have it. and check that NHL tab, sign up for alerts. We provide pretty comprehensive coverage of the league, whether it's news, features, all that good stuff. And, even talking yesterday with my editor, starting to talk about the draft and, mock drafts and features on players coming through the ranks. So the wheels are always turning, and I'm keeping an eye on the Jets too. This is gonna be a fun race down the what are we at, like last 18 games or so. So
yeah, every point counts for Winnipeg right now on a very, very tough road trip coming up after a big one tomorrow night against the Minnesota Wild. John, let's do this again soon. Thanks so much for the time. Always great having you on Winnipeg Sports Talk.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, good stuff with John Matisz. You can check him out. Give him a follow on Twitter at John Matisz. His Twitter bio is in the description of today's show on YouTube. And obviously, I think most of you probably already have the Score app, best in the biz. But if you don't already, you might want to download that. All right, we're going to get back to focusing on the Jets. Mike McIntyre's coming up in just a sec. I'm going to give a big shout out to our friends at Royal Sports. Spring is just around the corner. I know a lot of people planning maybe a spring break trip with the family. Royal Sports, the leader in snowboards, boots, bindings, everything you need to dominate the slopes is waiting for you down at 750 Pembina Highway, along with amazing hockey deals right now, including some Warrior sticks up to 50% off. And of course, the best selection of licensed merchandise anywhere, with the best of Jets, Bombers, merchandise, NHL, NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, and some of the top soccer clubs from around the world. Royal Sports, 750 Pembina Highway. Give them a follow on Instagram at Royal Sports Pembina for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. Fellas, looking to step up your wardrobe game as we get into the new season? Well, you know where to go for that. F Apparel at 190 Smith Street downtown, the leaders in custom clothing for men, with custom suits beginning at just $400. They also have an incredible selection of custom shirts, both tucked and untucked styles, dress pants, chinos, golf pants, and more. So whatever your menswear needs are, F Apparel's the place to go. And don't forget, 15% off for the entire wedding party when you and the fellas get your suits from F Apparel. Far better move than renting tuxes and having to return them and pay the big freight. And of course, if you do have a 2023 grad in the family, head on down to F Apparel, get the young man a suit to move into the next part of their life. And for every 2023 grad, F Apparel will hook them up with a free custom shirt and tie. Savings of about $150 when you buy a custom suit for a 2023 grad at F Apparel. F Apparel online. Make an appointment. Check them out, ephapparel.com, or pop down and see them at 190 Smith Street downtown. And I did pop into BP after the game last night. Some dejected, disappointed Jet fans with the end of last night's game. But the team heading out on the road after this big one tomorrow against the Minnesota Wild. Be a great place to get together with your friends for these games in Florida on the weekend, and Carolina before the Jets come back to take on the beasts of the NHL, the Boston Bruins, next week. And when you're at BP, fun pick-a-player contest for Winnipeg Jets hockey, as well as those ice-cold schooners, world-famous Boston wings, gourmet pizzas, and much, much more. And, of course, you can always order online at bostonpizza.com. All right, let's get back to last night's game and then a bit of a look ahead to a big one tomorrow for the Jets against the Minnesota Wild. Mike McIntyre, the Winnipeg Free Press, joins us now. Mike, what's going on? How did you see that one last night?
Well, there are games, Huss, that you can look at in a season where a team rallies to, salvage a point and then lose in overtime, where you would actually say, well, that's a point gained as opposed to a point lost. Like, not every overtime or shootout loss is viewed the same way. I don't think anybody, and I certainly would not look at last night as saying that was a point gained. That was, without a doubt, a point lost for the Winnipeg Jets. And I guess the big question now, one that we won't have the answer for 5 more weeks potentially, is will that lost point come back to haunt them in what is becoming an ever-tightening Western Conference playoff race. The Jets got a little bit of help, certainly on the out-of-town scoreboard last night with the Preds losing in overtime themselves, or in a shootout, so they didn't gain any ground on Winnipeg. And then Calgary, I don't know if this is good or bad. I mean, Calgary,
it's bad.
I guess it's bad it's good if you think the Jets still have a shot at finishing first. I don't know that that ship may have sailed at this point, because the Jets did gain a point on the Dallas Stars last night, but they lost a point to the Calgary Flames. And so both the Predators and the Flames are now 6 back of Winnipeg. And what's really interesting, Huss, is that the Predators, who look like they were burning it down to the ground at the trade deadline, they're only 6 back, but they have 3 games in hand on the Jets. And how big is next weekend's showdown in Music City now potentially looming between Winnipeg and Nashville? That could be a big one, just like the Jets game against Calgary near the end of the year could be a big one as well. So, that's a point loss for Winnipeg. That's a game that you look at all the chances they had to be ahead by more than 1 in the final minute. And credit to James Reimer, like that was quite a performance that the Manitoban put on, with friends and family looking on. But, the Jets, they shouldn't have been in a position to have that game go to overtime. And of course, Winnipeg has been money when games do get to overtime. So that was a bit of a slap in the face to see them not pull it out. I think a lot of folks figured, okay, well, they're still going to get the win here, albeit in extra time, but it wasn't meant to be. And so they move on, and they now get into the teeth of the schedule. I mean, you've heard the expression about March coming in like a lion. We're, I guess, a week into the new month, but it is about to get pretty ferocious here in the next 10 days or so, Huss.
Well, and I mean, obviously doing this every day, Mike, we spend a lot of time focusing on the here and now. But even when the Jets started to struggle in January, I remember looking ahead to the schedule coming out of the All-Star break. And there were a couple of areas in the schedule that were very concerning to me. One was the trip out east. We saw the way that one went. I mean, it really took Connor Hellebuck going completely out of his mind in that one game to get 2 points out of that one. Of course, it started off with, that loss against the Columbus Blue Jackets, and a common topic, total outage on the power play, 3-5 on threes, and a sort of softy on David Riddick that ended up, setting it off on a sort of a bad note, and they didn't really recover from it. But then it's this period right now, starting off with those 2 games against the Edmonton Oilers. This was the game last night. You had to have 2 points.
For sure.
Because now it's the Minnesota Wild, a 3-game road trip to a desperate Florida Panthers team, a Tampa Bay Lightning team that's going to be in a very sour mood with the way they've been playing as of late. And then the Carolina Hurricanes, one of the best teams in hockey. And then awaiting the Jets when they come back is the Boston Bruins. And if you look at Calgary over the course of these next 5 games, I mean, they do have the Minnesota Wild tonight, and I think most Jet fans will be cheering for the Wild. Hopefully those teams can beat the hell out of each other and maybe soften up the Wild a little bit for this game tomorrow. But I believe they've got the Coyotes in the next 5. They've got the Anaheim Ducks in the next 5. And the one thing I'll say about Calgary, Mike, is that they should be better than where they are right now. I mean, I can't say I look at this team and don't expect them to make a real push at some point. So the Winnipeg Jets are going to have to pick up points. It's going to be very tough over this next little while, and that's what makes that one left on the table, I think, sting that much more for both people inside the dressing room and among the fan base.
Yeah, and I mean, what the Jets no longer have, Huss, really is the buffer of being in the top 3 in the Central. And that's big, right? Because now it's a wild card situation. And so as Minnesota and Dallas, I know the Jets technically right now are in 3rd in the Central. I think they're one point ahead of the Avs, but Colorado has games in hand. And I think we're all waiting. It looked like Colorado was going to go on that monster run and maybe leave everyone in their dust. And then they've had a couple recent setbacks, lately. So hard to know where they're at, but I still expect the Avs to be in the top 3 in some fashion when the dust settles. So, if Minnesota and Dallas are also in there, well, that leaves Winnipeg in the wild card, and that means that there's really no separation between them and the teams that are trying to get into that top 8, Calgary and now Nashville. So you're right. The Jets are going to have to find another gear here, and certainly what we've seen from them as of late doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. To me, Huss, a couple things. This is a Jets team, and I get that, losing games will do this. They seem pretty fragile right now when something starts to go wrong, whereas early in the year, they seem to be able to kind of get a hold of it really quick and stop the bleeding. Now it's turning into a full-blown gusher. And so they're fragile. And, I thought maybe they had dealt with that a little bit the other night against Edmonton, where, they give up that goal right away again. This is Saturday night. Deja vu all over again, like the night before. But then they score 2, but then the Oilers get 2 back. And then you're thinking, okay, now here we go again. But then the Jets, to their credit, they persevere, get the lead back, and then hang on for dear life. But then last night, we'll see what that does to the overall psyche if they can quickly shake that off. And as you say, a red-hot Minnesota team, I think that has points in 8 straight games, coming into tonight, they're going to play the Flames. So one thing the Jets, I guess, have going for them is that they're sitting at home today, licking their wounds a little bit while the Wild have to play and then travel tonight. Can the Jets take advantage of that tomorrow? We will see. But yeah, they've got to find another gear here. And Huss, I dare say they got to find a killer instinct. Like there's an example last night where good teams would find ways to put the San Jose Sharks away. So again, that it doesn't get to a final minute scramble as it did. And, some of that was bad luck. Some of that was great saves by James Reimer. And you look at the power play, some of that is self-inflicted. A team that, for whatever reason, just can't get it going. Power play. Huss, it says something when last night the Jets were dangerous when they were 4-on-5 and they were 5-on-4. And I don't understand that. Morgan Barron had the 2 great shorthanded chances. The Jets didn't really get any chances like that on the power play, and I don't get it other than to state the obvious, which this team, they're trying to make the highlight reels. It seems like every time they have a power play, it's just pass. Eventually a shot, which maybe gets blocked or cleared, and then the inability to win faceoffs. They're spending half the power play trying to get established in the zone because typically the opponent is winning the draw and icing the puck, and then it takes the Jets a time or two to kind of get set up. So I know they spent a lot of time today working on it at practice. They better hope practice makes perfect because it is anything but perfect right now.
Well, we'll get to practice into some of that, but you basically nailed 2 things that just stood out in all caps to anyone that was paying attention to the game last night. 0 for 6 on the power play. And Mike, one of the things about the power play that's just lacking so much, I can remember talking about the Jet power play earlier on in the season when things were going well and this team was feeling it, and commenting on how different it looked like the stagnant power play we saw last season, because not only were they moving the puck around very well, but the players themselves were moving around. When you see the elite power plays in the National Hockey League, guys aren't just standing in their spots for as long as they can until they get a shot. They are moving it around, and for whatever reason, that is completely dried up. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of creativity on the power play. And more often than not, to your point, they're spending a lot of time fishing the puck from behind their own goaltender and trying to get in. And your point about the faceoffs, listen, I know there's some people that diminish the importance of faceoffs, but when you're protecting a lead, hell, when you're starting a power play, you'd rather use the 2 minutes as opposed to 140 or 135 by the time you actually get into the next zone. This is now really starting to hurt this team. And I, for the life of me, can't imagine. I mean, there's some things that guys just don't have a skill set to do, but how can an entire team be so poor in the faceoff dot consistently for such a long time?
Yeah, and I had someone point out to me how Adam Oates is like the personal skills coach of Mark Scheifele. Adam Oates is one of the best faceoff men in NHL history. And you wonder,
I don't know if they've been practicing that.
Well, maybe they should add that to the to-do list this summer, because Mark Scheifele, he's really struggling in the dot, but he's not alone. I mean, you'd think Pierre-Luc Dubois would be a great face-off guy. So much of it is body positioning. Yes, it's timing, but there's also, strength and size and all that. And Pierre-Luc Dubois has that in spades. So does Mark Scheifele. Those guys get eaten alive. I mean, Adam Lowry, of the three, of Scheifele, Dubois, Lowry is the best of the three. I think he's the only one that's above 50%, and it's barely above 50%. But yeah, I mean, look, possession matters. And when you have a 2-minute power play, possession really matters. And the Jets don't have possession of the puck enough. And when they do have possession of the puck, they're not putting it on net nearly enough. I mean, Huss, I think it says something when I'm looking here. Leon Draisaitl leads the NHL in power play goals. What's he up to? He's got 41 goals on the year, but 26 of them are on the power play. Kyle Connor is closing in on another 30-goal season. He's got 7. And we see Kyle Connor. We know what kind of shot Kyle Connor has. We know about his ability with the quick hands, the pick corner. How does Kyle Connor, 60-something games into the year, have 7 power play goals? Like, that's inexcusable. Either you're not getting Kyle Connor the puck enough where he can do damage with it, or Kyle Connor is passing up all kinds of chances that where he should be pulling the trigger. The Jets have way too much talent to have a power play that is this poor. And I guess what's really puzzling is it was going well early in the year. They were top 10. I think at one point they were close to top 5. They're now in the bottom tier of the league and falling fast. And, as games get tighter down the stretch here, Huss, and the proverbial, 3-2 league that so many people say the NHL is, maybe it's more like 4-3 these days, given that scoring is up. But, 1-goal games, that's how so many games are down the stretch. And we talk about the Jets and how they haven't got the so-called loser point in a lot of their losses. So many regulation lots. Well, lots of those have been by 1 goal. And you pointed to the Detroit game. I mean, we could go down the list of games where if the power play could have come through just once, they probably have a bunch more points in the bank. And we're not sitting here on March 7th talking about them being in a fight for their playoff lives.
Yeah, a lot to digest for Rick Bowness. And I mean, you've been in every one of these scrums all year long. I'm interested in your thoughts on what we heard from Bones after the game, because he didn't kill his team. And listen, I mean, they did play relatively well at 5-on-5. They generated plenty. James Reimer had to be great. But, I mean, the San Jose Sharks are in, well, you would think by looking at the standings, are in a different class right now than the Winnipeg Jets, especially with the trade of Timo Meier and where they're at right now. And yet that was a game right down till the final seconds. But thoughts on Bones, or actually maybe before we get to Bones, I did want to ask you about your perspective on how it fell apart in the last 2 minutes. And the Jets, when defending 6-on-5, sometimes some interesting personnel decisions from Rick Bowness. And again, if there's ever a time where winning a faceoff would help you out, that was a time when they could not even get one on 3 or 4 faceoffs in their own end in the final minute 50 with the goalie pulled. And of course, you know where it ended up. David Riddick behind him, fishing it out of his own net with 10 seconds left.
Yeah, so, the personnel decisions, I would agree, Huss, some curious choices there. And, hindsight is always 20/20, especially when things don't go well. You can look and say, oh, if they had only done this, it would have turned out like that. Blake Wheeler, I didn't think had a very good game yesterday. I mean, he wasn't moving well. Blake Wheeler isn't obviously going to blow anyone away anymore with his speed at the age of 36. Like, he just doesn't have it. but Blake Wheeler, he took that penalty in the offensive zone that Rick Bowness has said before. He hates those penalties, like where you're just not moving your feet. Some will call that a lazy penalty. I don't think that's a lazy penalty by Blake Wheeler. I just think that's a penalty where there's a quicker guy near him and he's trying to make a play. And
how do you not just hit the guy instead of sticking your stick in there when you know exactly what is going to happen? I mean, this reminds me, to be honest, that play, I'm glad you brought it up. That reminded me of like the early 2.0 era Jets, where Wheeler was notorious for taking stick penalties in the offensive zone.
So was Andrew Ladd.
I was just about to say those guys. And, that was one of the things that Paul Maurice really focused on when he took over and did do a pretty good job of cleaning up. But, I mean, Rick Bowness has talked about this team not moving their feet when they haven't been looking well. Yeah. Listen, I'll give Blake Wheeler a lot of credit, the way he handled losing the captaincy, and I thought he had a strong first half of the season. To me, he's looked nothing like that player since he came back from that very painful injury that took him out. And honestly, if you look, and I'm not hanging this on Blake because there was a number of other players that came back, but it's amazing to see what the results were of the Winnipeg Jets up until that point when Wheeler, Ehlers, Schmidt, and Appleton all came back at the same time. I'm not even sure this team's 500 since that point.
No, agreed. And so, again, it's easy to pick on Blake Wheeler, but that was an example in the first. I'm just saying he's not the quickest guy. So, but he's out there. Rick Bowness has him out there in that final minute. And of course, again, hindsight being what it is, but that icing by Blake Wheeler, that was not a good hockey play. It really wasn't. That's an unforced error. There's other options. I mean, you flip the puck a little higher, with less trajectory on it, and you just get it out to center, or you double back, or you find a teammate. I mean, the icing there was ill-advised. He's going for the empty net, I guess, misses. And again, it wouldn't be an issue if the Jets were winning 63% of the faceoffs. Instead, it was the Sharks when I think it's actually 67%.
68. Like it was pushing 70.
Yeah. So when you've got less than a 1 in 3 chance of coming up with the puck, and now you've got a tired group, and look, it was an unfortunate play that happened, right? The Jets actually blocked the shot.
Yeah.
And I think it was Wheeler, was it not, who got his stick or his skate on it. And of course, goes right to one of the few remaining elite talented players on the Sharks, in Tomas Hertl, and he's not going to miss from there. Like that's a freebie. And same with in overtime. Like, look, the Sharks aren't a good team. They still have a couple really good players, and we saw them. Hertl ties it, and that other guy, Logan Couture, he's a good player as well. He wins it, on the breakaway. But I didn't understand, Huss, like why isn't Vlad Nemestikov out there in the final minute? A guy that I thought had a really good game. He looks right at home on that third line, that checking line with Lowry. I mean, he's had a couple shot blocks already in his brief time. He's got the motor. Rick Bowness has talked about his defensive acumen. Why isn't he out there? And if it's a matter of deferring to your most senior guys, like that's something Rick Bowness has stated repeatedly, that he's not running this team. This isn't where your hierarchy gets you certain things. Like this is supposed to be about performance. And I think for the most part this year, Huss, it has been. Nate Schmidt was a healthy scratch the other night. He's a guy who is a veteran, and Rick Bowness clearly didn't like what he saw. And so he sat him down for a game. But that personnel decision in the final minute, and it wasn't the first time where that's happened. I mean, the Jets, of course, have now had a few games where they've given up a late goal, or in the case of Carolina early in the year, 3 late goals with the goalie out. And then Dallas did it a few nights later, 2 goals with the goalie out. Now, the difference in those games is the Jets managed to still get the extra point in overtime. But the Jets seem to struggle when the other team has the netminder out. And I dare say part of that is Rick Bowness seems to overthink it. Or maybe not think enough about it. And the guys that maybe got you there, your best defensive players, they're not necessarily the ones that are out there in that last minute. And I don't understand it. This shouldn't be about putting your best offensive guys out so they can get their cookie, in the form of an empty netter. You're trying to win the hockey game, not pad the personal stats. I think you'd want to have your best defensive guys, your most mobile, your quickest guys out there. And it seems like at times the Jets don't go that route.
Yeah, I mean, just the more defensively responsible. That used to just drive me nuts back in the Maurice era. I mean, it was always, line one going out there.
Connor, Wheeler.
Yeah, I mean, like, what are we doing here? And I mean, I think I was saying, like, where was Kevin Stenlund at the end of the game last night? And maybe
he's your best face-off guy.
Well, exactly. And I mean, think about what Bowness was doing when killing penalties against that Edmonton power play. Stenny was going in to take the draw, and when the Jets got the puck, he would then go off to bring on another more established penalty killer. But, I mean, I guess it is somewhat different. But to me, it's a 6-on-5 power play. Why would you not lean on and rely on the guys that you normally do when you're down a man in those situations, like we've seen a lot of other teams?
Right, and it wouldn't be so maddening to fans, I suspect, if the Jets weren't one of the best penalty killing teams in the league. The Jets are tremendous when they're down 5-on-4. Why can't they duplicate that success when it's 6-on-5? And I would say part of that, Huss, is because they don't necessarily put the same guys out when they're down 6-on-5 as they do when they're 5-on-4. And I guess the question should be asked directly to Rick Bowness here is, why do you change your way of thinking? Like, why aren't you using your penalty killers in a 6-on-5 situation? Why are you putting guys that you wouldn't necessarily have out on the PK unless you absolutely had to, because of injuries or, whatever. And it's just a strange thing, but it's something now where we've seen it enough times this year that it's starting to become a bit of a troubling pattern, right? And last night, especially, it was really costly because unlike maybe some of the games earlier this year, the Jets weren't able to survive their own self-inflicted wound and still get the point. And they came out of it, 1 point short.
Yeah, well, and Manny Fran in chat mentioning correctly that Stenny wasn't particularly good in the face-off dot last night, but none of them were. And, no. I mean, we're only one game removed from him being relied on for face-offs against that high-powered Edmonton power play almost exclusively, and then getting off when they had that opportunity. So, I mean, these are some of the things that have come out of last game. Obviously, there's no time to sit around and feel sorry for themselves because, as we mentioned, this is an absolute meat grinder of a schedule over the course of the next couple of weeks. Fill us in on, first of all, what did you make of Bones after the game? Because, I mean, there obviously was a lot of disappointment from everyone connected with the Winnipeg Jets, the way that game went. He did talk about, the fact that they did do a number of things right. They're probably winning that game more often than not. Credit to James Reimer and all that. But fill us in on what you thought about what he had to say last night and how that maybe changed to today at practice and what this team got after.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's only so many buttons a coach can publicly push, right? And we've seen Rick Bowness at times kind of lean into his team publicly. Last night wasn't the night, I don't think, to do that. And look what's happening in Tampa Bay, right? Like John Cooper, guy that's been to 3 straight cups and he's won 2. Like he went the nuclear option the other day, benched his 3 best players for the entire third period, sent a hell of a message in doing that. And then what was the Lightning response the next day? Get absolutely caved in by Carolina with 4 shots through 2 periods and ultimately lose 6-0. So, I think with Rick Bowness, there's obviously conversations happening behind the scenes. And I'll say this, Huss, I imagine there's still some frustration with some of his high-end top players and their inconsistency. So, I don't necessarily include Blake Wheeler in that anymore because I think Blake Wheeler, he's not now one of your 4 or 5 best offensive players. He's just not. But I'm looking at guys like Kyle Connor, who we talked about, Kyle Connor is just really fighting it right now. Mark Scheifele didn't have a particularly great game last night in a game where you could have used something from him. Pierre-Luc Dubois. Now, Dubois, he missed practice today. He's clearly battling something. He's not 100%. It was his first game back. I thought Nikolai Ehlers was a little bit better last night. He played a little bit more, so the coach clearly, trusted him to use him a bit more. He had the great assist, obviously, on the Nate Schmidt goal. You can't include Nino Niederreiter. Nino Niederreiter was the best Jet, by a mile last night. He was tremendous in that game, almost single-handedly, kind of willing his team into the fight. But I just think the Jets, they need more from their best players. And they're not getting it nearly enough lately. And, it stands out. And look at last night, right? San Jose ultimately gets 2 big goals from their 2 best players, and they win the game. The Jets get goals from Niederreiter, who just came to the team, and Nate Schmidt, who, was a healthy scratch. They could have used something from a Connor, an Ehlers, a Scheifele, a Dubois. So I got to think that there's some challenges being made behind the scene for these guys to step their game up when it matters most. I mean, as much as we want to debate things, Huss, like who's on the 4th line, who's the 3rd pairing defenseman? Is it Sandberg? Is it Stanley? Is it Capobianco? Is Axel in the lineup, or Gagne or Kuhlman? Those are not things that are going to win or lose a whole lot of hockey games. It's your best players. And, Connor Hellebuyck has obviously had some struggles over the last few games, although he was great in that 3rd period against Edmonton. He gets the night off last night. He'll be back in the net tomorrow. They need Hellebuyck, obviously, to be the Hellebuyck that we know he is, but they need their best scorers to start scoring, and that starts on the power play, but also at 5-on-5. If this team is going to go anywhere this season and make any kind of damage, they need their best players leading the way.
Oh, I could not agree with you more, Mike. I mean, and listen, we're guilty of this because, we're talking about it all day, every day. And yeah, we're focusing in on that 6th defenseman, who's in and whatnot, and, who's playing on the 4th line. This is pretty simple. When the Winnipeg Jets are playing well, when their top players are playing well, when the difference makers are making a difference in a positive fashion, this team's going to win. When their best players are not producing and the opposition is, well, you get a stretch like this right now where the Winnipeg Jets have 2 wins in their last 10 games and have watched everybody else in the Western Conference and the Central Division make up considerable ground on them. And tell you what, as we've talked about the schedule beginning tomorrow with the Minnesota Wild, this is going to be an incredible test for this hockey club as to, like, the Winnipeg Jets, never mind haven't raised their level of game. I think you can make the argument that they've really slipped back over the course of this last little while everyone else is doing the opposite. And this is the time where you need to ramp up your game because the playoffs are right around the corner. You need to be ready for it. But we might not even be talking about playoffs if the Winnipeg Jets can't get it together and, most importantly, grind out some points coming out of a very difficult schedule coming up and making the most of the few games they have on the schedule against teams that are destined for the lottery, like last night.
Huss, we've seen this core now for a number of years. There's been a few changes to it, but more or less it's the same high-end guys. And we've heard, end of last season, years before, the frustration, the disappointment. Rick Bowness has constantly told us this year, it's not about a lack of caring. These guys care. They want nothing more than to win. And I believe him. I really believe these players want to do it. But, to put it bluntly, it's time to put up or shut up. Like, it really is. And that's why, they wanted a coach that would hold them more accountable than what they had in the past. They were the leaders, the core. They were vocal about that. So they brought in Rick Bowness. And by all accounts, or most accounts, he's delivered on what they wanted him to do. He's holding them accountable in ways that maybe they weren't in the past. But that's where I think Kevin Cheveldayoff, he's probably learning a lot about what makes this core tick and where he goes, as early as this summer with this group. And so, what we see from this core in the coming days and weeks now is going to be very telling. And it's kind of on their shoulders. Look, the Jets are still in a position where they control their own fate. They don't need help, right? They don't need other teams to do their dirty work for them. The Jets still, they can go out and determine what's going to happen. They don't have as much room now as they did before, but they still have that ability. So let's see as the games get tougher, and tighter and the stage gets bigger, are these guys up for the challenge? And if they're not, time to bring some new guys in, I would say.
Well, I mean, I think that is coming in the summer. And to be honest, I think that they saw quite a bit from this core and from this team over the course of the past month. And I think that was a big reason why there wasn't more action in and around the deadline. And certainly that's just my opinion on it. But as I said, you're exactly right. I mean, this is a crucial time for the Winnipeg Jets, and you need these guys to step up. And I will say this, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this. The healthy scratch of Nate Schmidt, which was very clearly noted, this is a healthy scratch. We didn't like what happened the night before. I mean, it kind of comes back to that level of accountability. I'm sure if you pump truth serum into Rick Bowness, he's thought about doing exactly that with some of the guys that we've just mentioned, the most important players on the team. And I sort of took that as, all right, Nate's the guy that's going out. It's a lot easier to do that because the fact of the matter is we need these guys to step up. But maybe a shot at, hey, high-paid veteran players, it doesn't matter. They can be sat out too. And even though it was a defenseman on a lower pairing, I kind of thought that that was maybe an announcement to the rest of the team that no one is above it. And he might have to make some considerations to doing that for some other players. Although in the short term, with all of these games and points being so important, it is hard to make the argument that it gives you a better chance to win. And maybe the time having the ability to do that is sort of lost after the way this last 6 weeks has gone, despite now maybe being the time where it would have the most effect on the rest of the club.
For sure. And that's the juggling act, right? If you're John Cooper in Tampa and you've got, you're locked in basically to finish second or third, and you've got the track record that you have, like you can afford to, quote, lose the battle on a given day in an attempt to win the war, as the old saying goes. Like
John Cooper.
Right, for sure. The Jets, though, they don't necessarily have that luxury. But I agree 100%, Huss. That was a shot across the bow with Nate Schmidt. I mean, Nate Schmidt's the most positive guy on the team. Everybody loves Nate Schmidt. And that would have been oh my goodness, if Nate Schmidt can be sat for a game, then anybody can be sat. And we've seen Rick Bowness at times, Pierre-Luc Dubois, Nikolai Ehlers, they've had their ice time cut. They've moved down to other lines. I think folks would like to see a little more of that when it comes to maybe some players. And maybe the Jets now, like they're the deepest they've been all year, Huss, right? Only Cole Perfetti's injured. At one point they had 7 guys injured. Now they have 1. They also have Niederreiter and Nemestikov here now. This is the deepest, most talented lineup Rick Bowness has had available. So now would be the time to really lean on the guys that are going and to pull back on the guys that aren't. And that should go for everybody. But again, the Jets, like, this is on them. This is in their hands. It starts tomorrow. They're going to face a team that they're now chasing in the standings, a team that they were looking down on not very long ago.
And a team that kicked their ass earlier this season. Right. And I don't think that's lost on anybody.
It shouldn't be. So this is a big test tomorrow. We'll see how they respond because they know after tomorrow, 3 really tough road games in 4 days, and then the best of the bunch coming in here, and then back on the road for 3 more. Like they're playing, 2 more in Nashville and St. Louis. I mean, they're playing 5 of their next 6 on the road after tomorrow. And the one home game is against the most potent opponent in the league. So things could go south in a hurry here if they can't get their act together.
Hey, positive take. Maybe this is exactly what this team needs. I mean, to really, truly be tested. Sure. Now, I'll say this. Rick Bowness did say, that last weekend against Colorado, and then after that game going into the Islanders game, that, sometimes the game tests your character and your pride. This is that time. Well, they did not get a passing grade for the way they handled that, but I think it's a little bit of urgency, a little bit of desperation, and maybe getting away from home and having to step up and play against some of the best teams in the league is exactly what this team needs to both get their act together to a consistent form closer to what they were doing when they were winning way more hockey games earlier on in the season. Because first of all, you got to get your playoff spot, but also I think that if that does happen, maybe this sort of adversity and challenges, if they can rise to the occasion, which is a big if, I think if you ask some people with the way the last 6 weeks have gone, will be a good test. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. It's a huge game against a very good Minnesota Wild team that maybe fortunately is taking on the Calgary Flames tonight. And that'll be a part of the scoreboard watching this evening. Just before we go, Mike, fill us in on practice today. What were they doing? What were they working on? And we're going to hear a little bit from Bones after you jump on. But the general vibe around the club today, working on some things after a disappointing end to a game that overall was a pretty good performance by the team.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody was hanging their heads, and nobody's feeling sorry for themselves because they know the league is pretty unforgiving, right? Nobody's feeling bad for the Jets. Nobody's going to take pity on them. It's on them. As expected, power play work was front and center today. And, it's interesting with no Pierre-Luc Dubois at practice. Rick Bowness says he will play tomorrow. He just took today for maintenance. Obviously, he's still not completely healed from that injury. Vlad Nemestikov filled in on that top power play unit in Dubois' place. He would be a placeholder, obviously. So that was a primary focus for sure. No doubt the Jets will be watching the Flames and the Wild tonight. And I suppose the worst thing that could happen for Winnipeg would be a 3-pointer. They obviously would like Minnesota to win that in regulation, because right now they should be more worried about who's chasing them than who's ahead of them. So Calgary coming in, they're playing on a back-to-back, and then Winnipeg will get Minnesota on a back-to-back. Interesting too, Huss, I don't know if you looked ahead to the schedule. When the Jets play the Panthers on Saturday night, they will actually be playing Florida on a back-to-back, because Florida, they're playing Friday night at home. I believe it's to the Blackhawks. So an interesting scenario where Winnipeg will be in Florida, but the Panthers have another game before they play against the Jets. So, their next two opponents will be playing for a second straight night. Can Winnipeg take advantage of that? As Remis puts the lines up here, one other interesting change is Morgan Barron, who I thought had a really good game yesterday. He kind of switches places with Appleton. Last night it was Barron with Lowry and Nemestikov. Now it's Appleton back with Lowry and Nemestikov. I've liked what that third line has done. I know I was critical of the Jets not doing more at the trade deadline, and I stand by that, because I still think this was the year to really think big and try and take advantage. I'll say this, Huss, though. I've really liked both ads that Kevin Cheveldayoff made, and the price was certainly right. A second and a fourth-round draft pick. Niederreiter has been terrific, and Nemestikov looks like the kind of guy that the Jets really could use. So two good ads, and both guys now in the top 9. And it looks like it's going to be the same healthy scratches again tomorrow in Gagne, Kuhlman, AJF, and presumably Gustafsson, who is probably just a placeholder today on that second line. The other change, though, Huss, as you notice here, is Ehlers is now up. Ehlers and Connor switch lines at practice today. Ehlers with Scheifele and Niederreiter. That could be a lot of fun. And, again, I would imagine Dubois goes with Connor and Gustafsson. We've seen that at times this year, right? Like Dubois and Connor, and then they get separated. I think we'd all agree that when Kyle Connor's been at his best, and maybe when Pierre-Luc Dubois has been at his best, it's when those two guys are playing together. So it looks like that's back in the cards tomorrow after a bit of separation.
Yeah, no, it will be interesting. And yeah, I totally echo your thoughts. I think Nemesnikov's played two really strong games for the Winnipeg Jets, and Niederreiter was the best Jet on the ice last night. Yeah. And that is a little bit concerning when you're picking up two guys that were deemed expendable for their clubs, and they come in and have sort of been leading the way for a team right now. Hopefully the rest of the gang can follow suit in this big one tomorrow night. You're on this next road trip, right?
I am. I get my bingo card filled on Saturday night with the game in Sunrise. That will That will be my 32nd and final stop in the NHL. That's the one market I have yet to cover a Jets game in. So looking forward to seeing Paul Maurice and company. And Huss, I'm actually flying out on Thursday, a couple days early. Kenny Weeb's on the trip as well. As you probably know, both Kenny and I are big baseball fans. So we've planned quite the trip around this 3-game Jets trip. We're also going to take in 3 spring training games, one on Friday evening, one on Sunday afternoon involving the Blue Jays, in between Jets morning skate and the Jets game in Tampa, and then Monday afternoon in Dunedin involving the Jays before we fly to Raleigh on Monday night to then cover Tuesday's morning skating game. So 3 hockey games, 3 spring training games. Not sure if we'll be able to sneak in a round of golf, maybe a little bit of sleep. Should be a fun trip.
Well, I'm looking forward to a full report when you join us next week from the road, and we'll see how things are going for the Winnipeg Jets, because in the meantime, Minnesota, Florida, Tampa Bay, 3 big games for the Winnipeg Jets against very tough opponents, and even the Florida Panthers, who've been so disappointing this year. You want to talk about a desperate hockey club. That is the Panthers right now with their spot, in the below the playoff line right now, and trying to get back above it with a very limited number of games left compared to the other players around them. Mike, thanks so much for doing this as always.
You betcha, Huss. Enjoy the week.
Good stuff. You read all about it in the Winnipeg Free Press. That is our guy, Mike McIntyre. All right, gang, if you weren't aware, March 29th, 3 weeks tomorrow, is going to be the second ever Winnipeg Sports Talk Sports Trivia Night over at Little Brown Jug. If you're listening on the podcast, check our socials for a link to get tickets for the event. And if you're with us right now, I've just thrown the link into the YouTube chat. Pop in there, get your tickets. Hope to see everyone that was out there last time. Well, man, it was a great turnout, and what a great night that was. And if you missed it, make sure you count yourself in. Tickets are limited, so make sure you get yours, and hopefully we'll see you there down with our friends over at Little Brown Jug in the Exchange over on William Avenue. Quick update from the Briar this afternoon. Huge game right now between Brad Gushue and Brendan Bottcher. Gushue 4-1, Bottcher 5-0. It was singles. And 2 consecutive steals by Gushue has the defending champs up 3-1 after the 5th. And other matchups today, Quebec up on the wild card team. Saskatchewan and Nova Scotia 6-5 right now. And battle of winless teams. Jamie Cooey and Northwest Territories up 6-3 on the Newfoundland and Labrador rink. Good news this morning, Matty Dunstone and the Manitoba rink continues to roll. They beat Nova Scotia 8-4. Dunstone and the gang are 4-0. And they're playing again tonight, taking on the other Manitoba team, Reed Carruthers. Hopefully that one will be the feature game on TSN. 4-0 Dunstone, 2-2 Carruthers. That one will be tonight on TSN. Of course, all of our curling reports are brought to you by our great friends at Princess Auto, proud sponsors of both the World Curling Tour, Reed Carruthers team, and Team Jennifer Jones. And Princess Auto is also where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. 2 Winnipeg locations, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West. And you can always shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. Our friends at Culligan Water have been the experts in the water business, family owned for over 65 years, with everything Manitobans need when it comes to their daily water supply. Water softeners, filters, bottled water coolers, whole home systems, and drinking water systems, not to mention citywide water delivery services and commercial and industrial water products and solutions. Pop by and see them at 1200 Sargent Avenue. Give them a call at 694-5180. And you can always check out everything that Culligan can do for you and your family online at drinkculligan.com. And of course, a big cheers to our friends at Canadian Club, title sponsors of the Great Winnipeg Whiskey Festival, which went off to a raging success on the weekend, all in support of the Manitoba Sports Hall of Fame. a little bbit before we're in IG Field cracking CC and Gingers. But in the meantime, before Bomber season, you can pick up the great taste of Canada's favorite Canadian whiskey, Canadian Club, the original, at your local Manitoba liquor marts, and CC and Gingers in cans available at your local beer store in all likelihood as well. Hey, just before we get Remo back in here, big day tomorrow, 2nd anniversary. I think we're working on a little birthday cake from our friends over at the Nick and Nikki DQ group. Of course, if you're thinking about a delicious ice cream or blizzard cake for a party or event, you can hit them up on Instagram if you'd like at DQ Manitoba. Let them know exactly what you're looking for. They'll custom make it and get it ready for you for a quick and easy pickup at any of the 4 Nick and Nikki DQs. And while you're there, grab a blizzard, maybe one of those flamethrower burgers or any of the amazing stack burgers on the menu as well. 4 locations: DQ Niverville, DQ Northgate, DQ Polo Park, and DQ St. Anne's for our friends at the Nick and Nikki DQ. All right, let's get Remis back in here. Remis, I do want to get to the Coolbet lines and look at a busy night in the National Hockey League, but sounds like we've got a little bit of bones from practice earlier today.
Yeah, a lot of talk today about last night's game, of course. Face-offs, a topic. Jeff asking specifically about an icing that took place near the end of the game that we have discussed all show. And also about Minnesota Wild. Bones expecting to see some emotion from the club. And we're all hoping to see a nice spirited game, as it always is. Although the Wild have really had the Jets' number this year, but it's at home. Can we throw around biggest game of the year? It seems like every game now is biggest game of the year.
You know what? Absolutely. Tomorrow, biggest game of the year until this point. And then we'll say it again on Saturday when they're taking on. Although, I mean, this one is big. And, of course, Calgary, we'll get to this, but Calgary is in Minnesota tonight, and then the Wild coming here. We'll get to the readiness for the Wild in just a second, Remo, but let's get to the second clip. Bones was asked if the team's playing too tight at the end of games, because this is not the first time that the Jets have been victimized with the opposition goaltender pulled.
So you walk a fine line there when you're on like this, and there's a different energy on the bench and in the room when you're playing like Edmonton, the puck's going in, and then there's a different energy when we know we're playing well and the puck's not going in. So there is a different type of energy. But you just have to persevere and you have to keep pushing through it. Things that control what you can control. And we controlled the tempo of the play last night, the pace of the play last night. We didn't control the end result because we didn't score a goal. So that's always disappointing. So that's why you walk that fine line.
All right, Rick Bowness from practice earlier today. This just in. Here's another one from Bones, and he mentioned this last night that they did generate plenty of chances, few open nets that weren't cashed in on, and Bones kind of expanded today on the team, just not capitalizing some of the chances that they have been creating.
So you have different conversations where you're not creating offense, right? You can. So we're creating out. We did last night, clearly. You go after them hard because they're not scoring. That's going to make it worse. That's just going to really tighten it up. We encourage the fact that we're getting those chances and we're showing with these chances. You got to keep doing this. Eventually, the puck will go in.
All right, couple more from Bones, kind of focusing around last night. We've spent a lot of time talking about just how ugly those face-off numbers and how it did end up really biting them in the last couple minutes. Bones was asked if players other than centers can help with face-offs.
We always talk about face-off, being prepared for every face-off, win or lose, knowing what you're supposed to do. So yes, neutral zone, O-zone, the centerman needs help from the wingers to dive in there, find the puck and throw it back. In the defensive zone, he needs help from the defenseman to dive in there and help. So it's not just on the centerman. If the centerman ties up the puck and they beat us to a loose puck, then that's on that guy. Getting beat to a loose puck, that's not on the centerman. So they do need help. And different zones, different responsibilities. And we expect people to be in there and helping.
Well, Bones on face-offs and how it is more than just the centerman, but winning a couple draws certainly could have helped them late last night. Now, I believe this is Paul Friesen of the Winnipeg Sun, who asked Adam Lowry about face-off issues right now for the team.
Yeah, some nights it goes your way in the circle and some nights it doesn't. That's what I'd say. It's disappointing. Obviously, I'd like you to win one late, but that's not the case.
When you have a bad day at the dot, is it something you're not feeling right, or is it the other guy just has your number, typically?
I think it's a bit of both. Sometimes you kind of get out of, your time is a little off. Ideally, I think that last drop should have been blown dead and redropped, but sometimes you're not getting a good read out of the linesman's hand. Sometimes the other guy's a little quicker than you, so there's a lot of factors that go into it.
Adam Lowry discussing face-offs, which was obviously a huge topic coming out of last night. Now, the other thing that, was mentioned quite a bit in today's chat, and we did discuss with Mike, was, the opportunity to clear the puck, which ended up as an icing from Blake Wheeler. And I believe this is Jeff Hamilton asking Bones about that crucial icing in the final minute of the game.
There's a lot of chat from fans after the game about, the final minute or the final show where Blake decided to shoot the puck at the net. Now, I know he's really good at scoring empty net goals, but do you even have to have a conversation with him about that play, or is that...
They're retired. You have to get it out. And sometimes, again, the emotion takes over and you put a little bit more juice on it than you want. So, sometimes when you're tired, you do ice it just so you can get a breather, because... if you get it to center ice, they're coming right back at you. So, that's going to happen.
All right, there's Bones. Listen, kind of a tough answer. I'm sure behind closed doors he'd say maybe it a little more sternly. But there is an element of supporting players, but also pointing out you have to execute those opportunities because they can be crucial, and they certainly were, as it was last night. Here's just Bones on what his message to his team was today at practice, getting ready for the Minnesota Wild tomorrow.
Well, we got to, we talked about it immediately after last night's game. Okay, we move on tomorrow morning when you come to the rink. I want a positive attitude. I want us ready to go to work, and I want us to get ready for Minnesota. So that was my message right after the game last night. And the guys worked hard today. We're not going to come in here today and hang our heads because we lost a point. We're going to come in and get ready for tomorrow, and that's what we did.
All right, all systems go, focusing on tomorrow night against the Minnesota Wild. And here is one more from Jets head coach Rick Bowness on his team's readiness for the Wild, who are playing some great hockey as of late.
We went over some things that we have to do well today in practice tomorrow against their neutral zone. They play that 1-3-1. It's hard to get through there carrying the puck, so we worked on things getting through there. We worked on our forecheck to try to slow them down, make them spend more time in their zone. So they're a good hockey club. They've been getting fantastic goaltending, and they both played us in the two games that we played them. Now it's up to us to outplay them tomorrow. What's your read on the club's collective confidence right now? If you look at how we played last night, they're feeling good about how we played. You always want the puck when against Edmonton. It didn't go in last night. So you get 6 on Edmonton plus the empty netter, obviously, and then last night you have more opportunities and you get 2. So I think they're happy with the way they played. They're not happy with losing that point and not getting the goals that we know we needed to score at the right time.
All right, so there's Rick Bowness post-practice. And you know what, Reem? I'm going to take Bones's advice, basically his message from the team from last night. I'm going to take that today. We're going to move on. We're going to come in with a positive state of mind tomorrow for a huge home game against the Minnesota Wild before the team hits the road.
I find with some of these losses, you're like, oh man, that was so bad. And what's going on with this team? But then on game days, you just get so fired up for the game and you're feel like they got a good shot. I'm looking forward to seeing Minnesota, a bit of a new look with some of their additions. Marcus Johansson was one of them, Oscar Sundqvist and John Klingberg. So it's always a good game, and hopefully the Jets can hold up their end of the bargain, because there's been a couple against Minnesota lately where...
The Jets owe Minnesota one.
Yes.
The Jets absolutely owe Minnesota one.
Yes.
We remember a couple of those games earlier in the season, in particular one exceptionally ugly loss to the Minnesota Wild, and hopefully that's that is another test. I mean, Rick Bowness talked about a test of character and pride that the team's going through right now, or was, when he referred to it coming off of that game against the Colorado Avalanche. Maybe a little reminder about, what had happened earlier in the season. Certainly won't be completely out of mind. It's your boy Bruce. If the Jets really care about us, they will get a win on WST birthday tomorrow. I agreed. That's all we want. 2 points tomorrow night in a big divisional game. Hey, tonight, though, if you're looking for something to do, folks, big one down at the Ice Cave. Ice back at home following a 10-game road trip after going 8-2, taking on the Medicine Hat Tigers tonight. And the Ice can be the first team to win 50 games this season, 49-9-1 so far in 59 games played. And Zach Benson, who we will have on the show later on this week, 3 points shy of 100, second in league points, trailing only Connor Bedard of the Regina Pats. And I know you Winnipeggers love a great deal. This is the last 2 for Tuesday of the season. Big savings, 2 tickets for $24, 2 hot dogs for $8, 2 beers for $10, 2 popcorns for the price of 1. Great deals tonight. So get on down to the Ice website if you want to grab your tickets. 2 for Tuesday tonight. Ice taking on the Medicine Hat Tigers. I'm really looking forward to having Zach Benson on later on, Remo. We've spoken with a number of players on the ice over the last couple years. We haven't had Zach on, and we'll not only talk about the monster season he's having, but always interesting talking to young men, high draft prospects, and of course we know that Zach Benson will hear his name called in the top 10, potentially even the top 5 when we get to Nashville in a few months for that draft.
Yeah, looking at the WHL scoring leaders, there's Connor Bedard, got 123 points in 48 games, but right behind him, Zach Benson, 97 and 58. So Zach Benson second. Another one, amazing. You look at the top 10 in scoring in the WHL. Matthew Savoy, number 5, Connor McLennan, number 6. I know they didn't, the playoffs didn't end the way they wanted it to last year, but they're running it back this year. Has a lot of the same guys, and hopefully, it's a deep one for them. But looking forward to have Zach on, as we've never had him on, and yeah, it's a big year for him in terms of on the ice, but also off the ice with the draft coming up, and we're looking forward to hearing his name called this summer in Nashville.
You got lots of love for the Ice in the chat. Mary Jane says, I agree with you, Huss. We need a positive attitude tomorrow's game and bring good vibes to the boys. We'll be back in a very positive state of mind tomorrow for a big game. And here's an interesting one, Remo, from Mitch, the Godfather, WHT. I dressed Big Stan versus Mini. We did see Stanley with Schmidt today in practice, and it was Sandberg with Capobianco. I'm not sure if that's maybe tipping the hand a little bit, but would not be surprised, actually, now that Mitch has brought it up, if Stanley does get that opportunity tomorrow against the Minnesota Wild after missing the last couple of games after a pretty ugly night and being sat in the press box on Saturday after that loss in Edmonton on Friday night.
Yeah, well, I'll have to wait and see tomorrow what the lines are, but as of now, unless something major changes, Dubois expected to play, which was great news, as David Gustafson, the placeholder there with Connor and Wheeler, Ehlers, Scheifele, Niederreiter, and I know Mike touched on these, Nemesnikov, Lowry, Appleton, Meneline, and Stenlin. Barons, you got the Barron-Apple switch. I got to say, I didn't really mention Nino. I mean, this guy's basically been as advertised.
Unreal.
3 points in 4 games. Give me a Nino 62.
We had a good
jersey.
Nino chant at the game last night as
got
well.
a great chantable. How did his goal song go over? Disco Inferno.
It went good. It didn't seem to be played for a really long time. I'm not sure. It took me a little bit to catch it, and then obviously it was up on the screen for everyone to see. But I think there was quite a bit of cheering at that moment. We weren't as much focused in on the goal song. By the way, Coops waving from Texas here. Good show. Thanks, Coops. Always great to have people jump in and check out what we're doing here from elsewhere. All right, let's get to the Coolbet lines before we finish up, because this is a big night in the National Hockey League. Vegas and Florida tonight. The Florida Panthers, they need every single point that they can get. Very similar to the Winnipeg Jets, although even more desperate because they're 4-way tie for 68 points, having played the most games of those teams. They're at home, minus 152 favorites against the Vegas Golden Knights. Hurricanes minus 361 in Montreal. Leafs plus 118 underdogs in New Jersey against the Devils. Leafs have gone from the West Coast to the East Coast for this one. Devils in their first game back after a long road trip. Penguins minus 302 favorites against Columbus. And the Tampa Bay Lightning, losers of 5-6 in a row, got pumped 6-0 by the Carolina Hurricanes on Sunday. Very interested to see what they do tonight against the lowly Flyers. Tampa minus 289 favorite for this game tonight. Buffalo, got to have this one, taking on the New York Islanders. Sabres lost last night to the Oilers. Islanders minus 170, Sabres plus 144. Massive game for one of those wild card spots in the East. And the one that Winnipeg fans will be watching very closely, the Minnesota Wild, minus 142 home favorites against the Calgary Flames. Calgary making up a point last night on the Winnipeg Jets. Now 6 back with even games played. Calgary plus 121 on the road. Blues minus 145 in Arizona against the Coyotes, who are plus 123. And the Avalanche, a big, heavy minus 345 favorite against the Sharks that we saw last night. One other game, Ducks and Kraken in Seattle. Seattle's sitting pretty right now in a playoff spot, minus 311. Home favorites. Also got some curling. And in tonight's matchup, I'll give you one matchup, and that, of course, is the all-Manitoba matchup between Matt Dunstone and Reid Carruthers. A rematch of the Manitoba final, which was won by the Dunstone rink. Manitoba minus 345, Reid Carruthers and the Wildcard 2 team plus 247. Get on over to Coolbet. If you haven't played a Coolbet before, use the promo code WST on your first deposit for a 100% bonus up to $200. What's on the agenda for you tonight, Reem?
I'm playing no Jets. I'm playing hockey tonight. Actually, I'm pretty fired up, but I'll be keeping an eye on all of these games and maybe editing some videos here that will throw up on the channel. But I'm on the ice myself, so I'm looking forward to it. I haven't played as much as I would like to lately with young 4-month-old daughter at home, but happy to get out of the house when I can.
Well, good luck with that. I'm going to be doing a little scoreboard watching. I'm definitely going to tune in. As I say, I really hope that this Manitoba matchup with the Dunstone and Carruthers is on TSN. We will check that out. And other than that, just get ready for a big show tomorrow. Second anniversary of WST tomorrow, and then the Wild coming in. Tomorrow actually will be good. It's International Women's Day, and one of our favorite women, Jessie Pierce, is going to join us to tee up Jets and Wild. And, of course, we'll also have Murat Atesh on the program. And I know Murat's a big fan favorite. So looking forward to making that happen and hopefully seeing a different result than last night for the Jets in a huge game against their division rivals, who they certainly owe one to for what happened earlier this season. Hey, before we go, I know you wanted to, I was at the game last night, but I caught a little bit of this smoke from Reem earlier before we started the show. But where did last night's broadcast rank compared to the Canucks telethon infamous game?
Yeah, well, I'll say Trevor Kidd also going to join us tomorrow.
Kidder's
doing a great job with Sarah on the Jets post-game. So I'm watching the Jets. So the Jets have this run here on Sportsnet, and we know TSN is a regional broadcast rights holder, and I'm into all this broadcast, sports media. So I'm watching the game, and the Jets, there's 2 games last night. The Jets are on Sportsnet 1, and Edmonton and Buffalo is on Sportsnet West. And so that means, Edmonton, Buffalo, the main game to basically the whole country, and we're kind of the B game. I don't know why they do this. They show 2 games, but really only focus on the one game. So first intermission ends, and I don't know if I wasn't fully paying attention, but next thing I know, they're doing a feature on Rasmus Dahlin's charity work, and I actually had no idea why they were showing this. It took me such a long time to realize. I'm like, oh, because it's the national game, and it was just so everyone is doing a great job, the panel and all that, but it's just how they structure this broadcast where they show 2 games and really just give the Jets the shaft. Like, don't show any highlights. Don't talk about the game at all during intermission. I think it does a disservice to the fans.
Throw Kenny and Rennie on in between periods. The guys are there. They're ready to go. You know they'd love to get a little more FaceTime on the tube.
Like, they need to, I agree. More. This is what this is about. More Rennie during sports. Like, throw Ken and Ren on there during the intermission. Like, the panel, they're not talking about the Jets game. Like, the whole country, everyone else watching the Buffalo game. Like, why are we getting a feature on Rasmus Dahlin? I just don't understand like these choices here. And it seems like the Jets always get the short end of the stick when it comes to the national broadcaster. So I wanted to tweet it out, but I was like, you know what, I'll say, we got a show here. I don't work for Twitter. I work for Winnipeg Sports Talk.
That's right.
And people in chat have requested the Remo rant at the end of the show, and I was annoyed yesterday watching it. Why can't I hear about the game that I was watching during the intermission? What a concept that would be. So there you go.
Zim says Edmonton, Buffalo are 2 playoff teams. Well, Buffalo's not right now. I hope they will be. And they have a large following in Southern Ontario. That's great, but that doesn't mean a damn thing to anybody here in Winnipeg watching the game in this local market.
People agree with me in chat. Derek says, preach Remo, Tico Napoli, it's brutal. Dan, Jets fan, we're nobodies on national stage. And T-Will also adding, if there's something Rennie absolutely wants, it's more FaceTime for Rennie.
There will be no complaints.
Yeah.
If we get a little K&R in between periods. So let's start lobbying for that, because the guys do a great job, and it's far more relevant to Jet fans watching that game in the Jets area than probably a very nice bit on Rasmus Dahlin's charity. But let's face it, it's in between periods of a Jets-Sharks game.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens. I know they're on Sportsnet like a number of times this week. We'll see what happens Wednesday. Like, Saturday's the worst because they show 4 games at once. And so if you're watching any of the games, they don't spend like 30 seconds talking about the game.
If that, usually the people that are on the panel are not even aware that the Jets are involved in a game.
Yeah, so
we're talking about the Leafs' 4th line and, what Connor McDavid's up to at whatever that.
Anyway, well, we saw it in the playoffs, too, when, the Jets would play the Oilers and they just would talk about McDavid the whole intermission. So, I mean, we'll have to, I don't know. It's something we'll watch on, but, people are asking, any good board ads? Last game, the new promo is Original 6 against the Bruins. They're not doing Bergeron versus Scheifele or... What would it be? Pasternak versus Connor. He hasn't been highlighted. We'll have to see.
That is going to be that's going to be a tough one. But lots of hockey to get to before that, including a huge one tomorrow against the Minnesota Wild. Trevor Kidd, Jesse Pierce, Matisz. It's going to be a heck of a show for our 2nd birthday tomorrow. It's so much fun for our 500th show yesterday. The milestones continue. We will see you tomorrow. Huge thanks to everyone that joined us today, including John Matisz and Mike McIntyre of the Winnipeg Free Press. Great stuff from Remo, cutting all that audio to get you the latest from Rick Bowness and Winnipeg Jets practice today. And a huge thanks to the sponsors that make this show happen each and every day. And most of all of you, hit that red subscribe button if you haven't already, gang, and give a thumbs up on your way out. We will see you tomorrow, 1 o'clock, for a game day edition on our 2nd anniversary of Winnipeg Sports Talk, live at 1 on YouTube. We'll see you then. Have a great night.
Oh, my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.